Hello.
Hi, thank
Afternoon. Hello.
Hi.
Hi.
All right, you've just won.
Yes. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Khaled Kateli, and I'm here to talk to you about legacy. For the next 5.5 minutes, I'm going to talk about assets, investments, and deposits without ever referring to the financial industry. Because legacy is the only life investment you'll make. Can I get a clicker that works? Let's push that through. I'm going to keep going anyway. Over the past 40 years, male fertility has halved. And in fact, infertility affects about 1 in 7 couples globally. And when you think about fertility, you might think that the burden or responsibility falls on the woman to get her eggs frozen and to have her fertility tested. If you think that, that point of view is outdated and wrong. Because actually, 30 to 50% of the time when a couple can't have a child, the burden falls on the man. And in fact, every year you get older as a man, there's an ongoing decline in your sperm quality. How many of you have cell phones right now? Where do you keep them? I know where I keep mine. But it's not just cell phone radiation you have to think about. It's pollution, drinking, smoking, drugs, obesity, sexually transmitted diseases. The list of risk factors goes on. All men should be thinking about freezing and testing their sperm, but the problem is the experience today is so awkward and clinical of going to a clinic to do it. Legacy is the first company focused on the consumer experience of testing and then freezing men's most valuable assets. Now, I'm going to show you very quickly what our product looks like. And this has been very carefully designed in a couple of key ways. Thank you. So it has 2 key features. So beyond just it's designed to look and feel a very particular way. So when a client makes an order online, this is what they receive at home in this discrete packaging. They receive an envelope with handwritten information that is relevant to them, as well as a unique client ID. And then they get 2 items. One is the deposit cup, as well as something called a buffering medium that helps keep the deposit viable for up to 48 hours. That and the special installation of the box helps ensure that we can then pick up the kit from the client's home, send it to our partner clinic, where it is tested, analyzed, and then frozen. Now, I'm going to show you very quickly what the website looks like, just to give you a sense of the overall brand. And if we can switch the laptop too, please. So this is the key website, and I'll show you what the process looks like because we have a very clear 5-step process for our clients, from steps 1 to 5. And as part of that, we also explain to all of our clients our core values as a company. So they know that privacy, quality, security are at the heart of everything that we do. So once we finish with the process with the kit and sending it to be frozen, we share with all our clients a personalized fertility report. That report looks more or less like this. So we give an overall assessment, as well as some personalized fertility recommendations. We then go over some core elements of fertility: concentration, volume, morphology, motility, and so on. And we even take it one extra step, which is a day after the deposit has been frozen. We do what's called a post-thaw motility check to make sure that the sample is still viable and can be used in the future. Back to the slides, please. Thank you. Now, the team blends business, healthcare, and fertility expertise. So I studied business at McGill. I studied policy at Harvard. I was a healthcare consultant for several years, and I'm certified by the American Society for Reproductive Medicine. Daniel Madero, the head of clinical partnerships, actually helped run for 5 years the largest fertility clinic in Colombia and has worked with multiple startups at MIT and Harvard. Now, in the immediate term, we believe there's an addressable market of about $8 billion in the US alone. And I don't want to get too hung up on the overall size, because that's the overall addressable market. But this is, if you take the US and you filter to men who are aged 20 to 49 with household incomes of over $70,000, this is the immediate addressable market. But expand that to the rest of men in the US. Expand that to men in Europe, because we think that all men should be thinking about testing and freezing their assets. Now, the customers are men, but in many ways we focus on their partners and the people around them. For example, 250 companies in the United States offer fertility benefits to their employees, focused largely on IVF and egg freezing. We think every one of those companies should be a client of Legacy's as well. We also go direct to consumer. We target men in professional services for the most part: consultants, lawyers, bankers, high-stress jobs, high disposable incomes, and they want to have a family, but maybe in the future. And we do a lot of what I call indirect to consumer, which is reaching out to the men's partners, because we all know that actually women are the chief medical officers of the household. And compared to the $10,000 price tag of egg freezing, our product is 10% of that cost and can be done at home with 100% customer satisfaction. Now, we do have some indirect competitors, sperm banks, very focused on donation, clinics, awkward consumer experience, fertility testing companies, very emasculating branding. So we're testing two business models, one fertility and analysis and freezing bundled, the other unbundled, which is the analysis first with an ongoing option to freeze if you so choose. And ultimately, this is just the beginning. 23andMe, Hims, Roman, these are companies that have completely revolutionized the way that people think about very personal and very sensitive topics. Today, these are companies that are growing and are only going to get bigger. And I say all this because in the future, legacy will be the norm. Thank you.
Judges?
It's a great name.
Thank you.
Do we have legacy.com?
GiveLegacy.com.
Give Legacy.
Yes.
What would it take to get legacy.com?
Legacy.com is unfortunately an obituary website currently. Rather unfortunate.
You can merge
celebrate life, and so do we.
You can merge.
You see the synergies, right?
Absolutely. So how do we make money here? Who pays for it? It's a little bit unclear to me.
Sure. So when our client goes online and orders a package, they pay us a certain amount, and that goes to us. We then pay the clinics that we partner with and the cryo-storage facilities that we partner with as well.
They pay out of pocket, or you can have insurance? Like, how does that work?
Right now, the clients pay out of pocket. The longer-term goal for us, of course, is to get this wrapped up in company employee packages, but also potentially insurance companies as well. Yeah.
So do you have a B2B component now? Are you sorry, I didn't
Yes.
catch that. Or only direct to consumers?
We're actually testing both.
Okay.
And I think that we will discover where we're seeing more uptake. But right now, we're in serious conversations with a few businesses that already offer employee fertility benefits for women. And we're trying to convince them to be offering the same for men.
And typically, if someone goes to one of the traditional clinics, is that reimbursed by insurance, or is that also out of pocket?
It's a good question, and the answer to that is it depends. If you are doing it for what I call reactive purposes, so for example, if you have cancer, you're about to undergo chemotherapy, you're doing fertility preservation, that would be covered under most insurance packages. Proactive, not at this time.
Okay.
So how much advice do you give? So if someone sends in and you get the results back, is it up to the customer to go to the doctor and get the advice, or are you acting as someone who's giving the advice on how to proceed depending on the state of the sperm?
So that's a good question, and that's a very fine line for us. So we get a set of very clinical results from the clinic. These results, of course, as many of you might know, are basically incomprehensible to the average human being.
Yes.
That's why we have the report, which is a simplified, easier to understand version. We're very careful to say that, of course, if you want professional fertility advice, you should be going to a clinician. But here is the results that you have gotten from the clinic. Here's how you can help. Here's how you can think about them, and here's how you can actually improve your fertility, if that's an interest for you.
Is there a data business here as well as the consumer business?
Yeah. The answer to that is yes and no. So yes, in the sense that we have a model right now that we're building, and the goal is to be able to actually have people fill out a lifestyle form, so about 30 questions, from which we would be able to predict with very high levels of accuracy whether or not we think they would be fertile or potentially subfertile. So there's a data component in the sense that we do feed the data that we get into improving this model. But going back to our values as a company, privacy is the absolute #1 value. We don't repackage and then sell that data. That is anathema to the way the company was built. So I think 23andMe is an example of a company that has repackaged, repurposed, and sold. There was a big backlash several months ago when it turns out that they had sold a large amount of consumer data to one of the big pharma companies. And so we are very much against that.
Can you talk a little bit more about how you're going to reach men who maybe traditionally just don't want to think about this? Or maybe they do.
Yeah. I'll tell you, I think about it two ways. So the first is direct conversations with men. I've had well over 1,000. And men go from the initial reaction of like, whoa, right? And almost inevitably, with about 99% success rate, they will then make a joke about it. Be like, oh, bro, do you need a deposit? Right? And once they get that out of their system and they see that I'm addressing it in a very serious way, they shift as well. And then our goal as a company, and I think the success of Legacy rests on our ability to do this, is to take men through that journey of, I've never thought about it before, to maybe I should do it, to I definitely should do it, to I definitely should do it right now. And this is the 4-step process we take men on. So this is step 1 of the equation. I think the best way to accelerate that process is to go through the people around them. And I'll give you one quick anecdote, which is L'Oreal in Canada did a fascinating study a few years ago on men who buy facial products. And they found that in 1/3 of these cases, men had had no role whatsoever in the decision-making process. They had been told by their partner, here's what you're going to buy, here's where you're going to buy it, here's how you're going to buy it, here's how you're going to pay for it,
Yeah.
and here's how you're going to use it. And I see the female judges are nodding along, I think, because likely is something you've seen as well. And I think that women can be very compelling in convincing their partner, for example, to think about their fertility as well.
When I see your website, I don't see talking to the partners.
For now, the website itself is focused very much on the men. Because honestly, my goal is that when a man views the website, he feels comfortable about it.
Yeah.
The goal is to develop a site that you can view in public without people knowing that it's necessarily a fertility website.
So how do you reach the people around him then?
So my view on it is as follows. I think that women are already so thoughtful about fertility. Women are at step 4. And so they don't need kind of this masculine brand that men might. And so they already are very aware of the topic, and they'll feel comfortable sharing a website like that with their partners.
Is there a, sorry if I missed, is there a subscription aspect to this beyond the initial sale?
So I'm testing 2 models right now. The first is the kind of the bundled package that's intended primarily as a one-time fee. The unbundled package, which I think is more interesting, because it also introduces a more accessible price point. So to say for $350 US, you can get your assets analyzed, and you then have the option of freezing it. And then that would be a monthly fee of about $15 a month.
And you would do the freezing and the storing, and you'd get charged on a monthly basis
Correct.
for as long as you...
Correct. Yeah.
Which part of the which part of the process do you own, and what do you outsource? In the analysis, for example, etc.
So we own the kit and the design of the kit, as well as the technology that goes into it. The actual clinical analysis is done by our partner clinics. What we've done is we've created what I call the Legacy Standard, which is a series of regulations that we expect all of our clinics to follow. Again, going back to these core values, quality is key. And even if someone else tries to come out and create a similar company where there's a real risk that they would do so irresponsibly. So the goal for us is to do it in a very responsible way. So we partner with clinics, and we partner with cryo storage facilities as well. And I'll add just one more thing onto that, which is, so something that we do is we do what's called multi-site storage. So when a client sends us their assets, we actually divide it into 2 different geographic locations. And within each geographic location, we divide the sample into 2. So actually, their asset is stored in 4 different locations.
How does the math work? Cost of customer acquisition, your cost of goods sold, like how does this stuff work?
So without getting too granular into our figures, we have comfortable margins now of about 30%. We're still figuring out what the exact customer acquisition cost will be, in part because it's not a one-time decision for men. This is something that they have to be educated about, to raise awareness about, and that might take even several months.
So are we an education and marketing company and logistics? Or we're like more tech, genomics? Like how do we think of ourselves?
So I wouldn't segment it so clearly into one or the other, but certainly there's a big emphasis on education and awareness. So we are helping to get men thinking about it maybe for the first time. So certainly that's a big part of what we do.
What makes this defensible long term? What prevents the next company with more funding to just catch up and take over?
This is a question that I think about every day. And I think my best answer to you is as follows, which is there will eventually be a competitor, maybe someone doing something very similar to what we do. And they're going to move fast, and they're going to break things. And what they're going to do is they'll come in with a lower price point, more aggressive marketing, and eventually a company like that is going to fail spectacularly. Because if you don't, when you are dealing with quite literally men's most valuable assets, their sensitive genetic material, you cannot afford to cut corners. You cannot afford to be sloppy. You have to treat it very carefully. And that's why the value-driven approach of Legacy, which has been developed over a long period of time, I think is critical to the long-term success of the company. And I don't think that a competitor can match that.
So you're going to get legacy.com to get started, and then how do you convince me that this is my most valuable asset?
So it's not necessarily me who has to do the convincing. It's the people in your life.
Yeah.
So it's the people around you who might be saying, hey, you know what, I just saw I just saw an ad for Hims. I just saw an ad for hair loss. I just saw an ad for Roman. I just saw an ad for Legacy. I mean, aren't these things that you might have thought about before?
Final questions?
I just want to say that I think it's a great idea, basically, in terms of kind of from a gender perspective. Yeah, I just want to kind of say that because I don't know if I'll see you again, so I'll make sure to say that.
I appreciate that. Our goal is really to rebalance the responsibilities of family planning.
Yeah.
And to help families have kids when and how they choose. So, thank you.
Awesome.
Super.
And on that note, one more round of applause for Legacy.
Thank you very much.